Today on the podcast, we have our first guest, Gurpreet. Hi,
Hi,
Gurpreet.
hi, hi. I don't think design was such a big thing.
Yeah. What do you think about this, like, little bit of debate that keeps going on
Yes,
around?
yes. So, firstly, I think the debate is definitely spot on. If you don't want to invest in a gym, you know, wait till you see the surgery bills.
Oh my God.
Many designs are not feasible for engineers to do given
Yeah.
the budget, given the time.
Timeline.
Right? So, it's hard to get good designers, and then once they come in the team, you suddenly see the impact.
What do you think a good designer adds that the AI can't do? So, hi everyone. Today we are at the MyUXScore podcast, and we're going to be talking about design, technology, and things that are going on right now. It's going to be super exciting because today on the podcast we have our first guest, Gurpreet. Hi,
Hi,
Gurpreet.
hi, hi.
And we're very excited to talk to him about multiple interesting topics today. So Gurpreet has been in the space for 2 decades, right? More than 2 decades actually
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
And he's seen it all from where we were 2 decades ago to now with all the AI coming in. I'm sure it's been a crazy journey for you. So we'll talk about that. Gurpreet right now works at Kaizen. He's a product consultant. Is that right?
Right, right.
And he's been doing some very interesting things in technology, and we're also going to pick his brains on what he thinks about some burning topics in tech and product management. So we're very excited to have you, Gurpreet.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you very
Yes, do
much
you
for the
want to tell
opportunity.
me a little bit about yourself, like how's your journey been so far and
Yeah,
how are
so I'm an
things?
engineer actually, about 20 plus years. Worked in multiple organizations, primarily product organizations, 10 years in ThoughtWorks, where I got a lot of exposure on design products and also was a product manager for an open source product, a hospital management system called Bhamni,
Yes,
which
yes.
gave me a lot of exposure. So maybe we'll talk about
Yeah, we
it
will
as
talk
we
about
move
that. I
ahead.
think it's very interesting because that domain is quite something that is not so digitized yet. So super interesting. Awesome. So Gurpreet will start with the first part. Yeah.
Sounds good?
And so you've been working with all kinds of development teams for the last many years. And I'm sure you've seen all types of people and types of teams. Now, initially, was design a thing in development cycles, or how was it like before it became so mainstream? Like,
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember, right? Like my earlier years when I started working, usually design, I don't think design was such a big thing,
yeah,
right?
it
Like we
was not.
wouldn't really say, hey, design, let's get a UX or so on. In fact, I don't remember having UX folks or even UI designers. We had UI
Yeah,
developers,
yeah.
and UI developers were the one who knew HTML and
Yeah.
CSS, and then they would do things, and then we
Front
would
end,
say,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
front end
yeah,
development.
yeah.
And then someone would come in and say, hey, you know what, make it look like this, make it look like that website, and then we would use themes. I think the first major aha moment came when Bootstrap came into the mix, right? So you had like these Bootstrap available as a CSS, as
Yeah,
themes, and people would use Bootstrap, and suddenly your app is like looking already double quotes professional, and
yeah,
everyone's happy with that, and then you would move. But I think
yeah.
design more as a discipline
Hmm.
and its branches and its appreciation, my guess is it was 7 years or more in my career
Hmm. Like
before I
7 years
started
from
hearing. Yeah, so
ago?
it will be like
Yeah,
2007 to 2010.
yeah,
2010ish is
yeah,
where I feel
yeah.
I started
That's
hearing
when it
about
started
design
coming
much
in.
more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And there again, like US, it seems was leading the front
yeah.
there, and then India has been catching
Catching
up
up. Yeah,
on that.
yeah. And so, how did it change? Like when design came into the picture, was it like a shake up for the tech team? Like were they not so happy about it because front end was the design before, right? Now
Right,
it's a
right,
separate thing and there's a
right,
whole new
right,
person and
right,
approach to it.
right,
So
right.
how was that like?
So I can speak from my experience.
Yeah.
I think what I saw around me was the first time, design kind of came front and center is you go, you meet to a particular client, and the client says, hey, listen, we already know what we want to build. And by the way, here is a set of screens that we have hired a design agency to take,
Yeah.
and go ahead, build this. Tell me how much you will take to build this. Now that was quite surprising because just before that it used to be like, hey, let's talk. let's understand your problem
Yeah.
statement, let's do this, versus now completely shifting over to, hey, we already know what we want to build,
Just
here
make
is a
it.
set of designs, just make it. And I feel like that's when we realized as a team that, hey, now there are design firms, and the design firms, clients first go to them, get a sense of the
Yeah.
product, and then they just come and say, hey, build it for us, and which has its drawbacks, frankly, but
Yeah.
the designs look in most cases really good,
Yeah.
and like to some degree utopian in some cases. But that's when we started
Yeah.
seeing design first, like the design first
Approach to
the
things.
UI is is pre-created for you, just build this and make it look like that. So I think that's when it started, and then slowly we started hearing terms like service design, visual design, user
Yeah.
experience, XD, experience design. And for me, ThoughtWorks actually really helped me formally understand the importance of it. And now I can't imagine like getting into
Without it.
product without a design
Yeah.
person in there. As a product person, I think the design person is your partner. So
Yeah.
without the
Yeah.
design person, it's very unlikely that your product will do well.
Yeah.
That's where I am now.
Do you think like what I've observed is a lot of folks, like tech folks, are not they're like, oh, design to bana diya.
Right.
But like design is made, but it looks too nice, but like maybe this spacing is not that important, like we'll just make it like we think. I think it's both ways. The designers are also in their own world, la la land of, oh,
Yes.
this looks really cool, but
Yes.
the tech folks are like, okay, but what's the functionality of
Yes.
what do you think about this like little bit of debate that keeps going on around?
Yes. So, firstly, I think the debate is definitely spot on. I think, and because examples of all kinds exist
Yeah.
now, right?
Yeah.
So, where someone went overboard on the design piece, but kind of didn't look at the functional or the engineering piece. So, some examples, right? So, I think the conversation would be helpful if we look at it from two ways. One is engineers, where will designers really be helpful? Designers, where will engineers be very helpful? I think we should like look at
Both
it from
ways, yeah,
both ways, right? So
absolutely.
if I look at, let's look at a designer first, right? So I'm a designer, and I feel like, hey, I should just go ahead, do the research, talk to users, understand the problem statement, create the designs, and once we have this product and its design and thing ready,
Yeah.
then we will get the engineers to get a sense of implementation cost,
Right.
architecture, because all that in a way is the background. Now, theoretically, it sounds good, okay, and that's the approach I've seen a lot of companies seem to end up making, right? When they think that the user and the product is first, so let me first get that out of the way. But what ends up happening, again, my experience is that many designs are not feasible for engineers to do, given the budget, given the time,
Timeline.
right?
Yeah,
No one has infinite budget. Everyone wants to go live fast. They want to do a product market fit. They want to figure out things are good. But if you come up, like for instance, you might say, hey, let's do a search feature, and the search feature I will type things fast, and I'll show results.
Yeah.
But if behind it the data is large, it's a population of the country, or it's the population of a city, or so on and so
heavy
forth,
data sets.
heavy. So now the effort of an engineer making something like this is going to be very
much
high.
higher. Right.
It's again, infinite scroll, for instance, you want to build an infinite scroll. In some cases, yeah, it makes sense, but in some cases it requires engineering to ensure the performance of the device doesn't go out of the. Some people might say, hey, why don't we give a pagination book like experience, right? The book like experience might cost the engineers much lesser to build than an infinite scroll experience. And then it's also about the tech stack.
Yeah.
You are building
What
a
is
mobile app
possible?
or a web
Yeah.
app. Oh, I'm building a mobile app. Okay, in this mobile app, will it be a native app? Will it be a hybrid app? Will it be a responsive web app? These are tech decisions also, and they are design decisions also, right?
Correct.
So you might say, hey, if I'm building Instagram, it needs to be a native app. I want that. But if I'm building, let's say, a banking retail app, a native app may not be the choice from an engineer's perspective or the budget perspective, because then I will be building native for every platform. Maybe I'll go for a hybrid app.
Yeah.
Moment it's an hybrid app, the designers, if they are aware that this experience now is going to be slightly limited.
Correct.
If it's going to be limited, how do I maximize the
Experience
in that constraint, right?
Yeah.
So am I playing badminton or football? I need to know that.
Correct.
Then I'll play within those rules, and I can do a good job in either of the sport, right? It's just that I need to make sure I'm playing for the right sport.
Yes.
Design for a football field and later you say it's going to be like a cricket, then it's like, okay, you know, all this effort gone down the drain. Now I
Yeah.
need to again do some experiments with the users, again get some feedback.
Yeah.
So this is where I feel like it's very important for UX to involve engineers as early as possible.
Yeah.
It has all other advantages.
Absolutely.
The engineers may be able to say, hey, if we did it like this, the experience will be also better and the cost will also be lower. So I feel from a UX perspective, engineers should be involved early. So
Yeah.
this is like
From
one
the start,
side.
no?
From the start. In fact, definitely the faster the key people of your team are involved, the quicker your overall speed would be, because they're going to understand the domain, understand the users, understand the product, understand why a piece of design is important. Like, you know, like if you did it like this, the users are going to benefit in this way. Once you get buy-in even from engineering, then they're like, okay, let me figure out how to get it done.
Everyone's aligned also to the end goal, right?
But then there's the flip side, which is why do engineers care about designers, right? So an engineer could say, listen, I have all these design systems already in place. There's material UI, there's this,
I don't
there's
need
that.
design.
I don't need designers, right? I can make very nice looking UIs.
Yeah.
But design is not about nice looking
It's
UIs.
not, absolutely.
So
It's
that's
so
the first
much
thing.
more, the journey, the flow, all of that.
Right. And how do people feel, right? So one of the things I keep telling people is that if the design is good, either the user's reaction will be, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Or it will be, they haven't noticed anything. Because
Which
they
is
can
which
just
is
do.
success.
Yes, because
Yeah.
they can just do what they want to get done.
Correct.
And that part is really important.
Yeah.
If I'm solving a problem for the user, for them it's a pain, right? Like let's say filing taxes is a pain, okay, for us.
Yeah.
If filing taxes is a pain, I don't want a UI that looks amazing. I want a UI or
That
a product
works.
that just gets it done.
Yeah.
Right? I wanted to get it done. Seamless. I didn't even think about it. I opened the app, I uploaded, you know, my form 16. It somehow figured everything out. It showed me this is what you have to do. Paid 50 rupees through UPI and you're done.
Yeah.
It's not an experience in the sense that, hey, come see what a UI. No, it's about,
I don't want to
hey,
spend time
it's
there,
done like that, right?
Yeah.
So firstly, we need to know what we are aiming for, and then the design person comes in and says, this is how it will be frictionless.
Yes, the complete experience of it. Yeah.
It's not about the UI. It's not about what it looks like. It's not
the whole
visual
package,
design.
right?
It's the whole
What's
package.
the end goal, end experience for the user?
Right.
How do they perceive it?
And the reason I empathize more with this is because in Bhamni again, right, we were like an open source product, less budget, you know, not a profit making product by design. So then, you know, getting UX capacity was hard for us because in India, great UX folks are very hard to get.
Yeah,
they are very less available and they are going to be expensive.
Yeah.
Demand and supply, right? So we saw firsthand what would happen if you did not have UX capability on the team, right?
Really?
Yeah. So and then, you know, you like, oh, this isn't good. Oh, we need a UX. Okay, then a great UX comes to the team and everyone's like, wow, let's quickly get the designs done before this person rolls off in 3 months, so that we have a roadway, you know, like a roadmap on what we can do. So
but that's interesting. What was different? Like, what did you guys struggle with?
So actually many things I would say. So I'll give you an example. Let's say there is a patient registration feature. In the patient registration feature, you are trying to register a patient, and now we are building for a public hospital or an NGO hospital. Now in a hospital like this, the number of patients that show up are very high. One of our first customers, Jan Swasthya Sahayog JSS in Chhattisgarh, they see about 300 patients a day.
Okay.
If you have a large number of patients, you have very less time to do registration. Everyone's like in a bit of a stress. They want to get it done. The queues are long, so on and so forth. So your registration screen needs to be like efficient, right? But you also cannot make a mistake. You are in the health domain, right? You can't just say, oh,
is very important.
yeah. So what happens? And then in rural areas, a lot of time people's names are the same. You have 7 Rams, all coming from Rampur, as an example. Right? So
there's no identifier.
It's not easy to identify, right? So it's not easy to identify. What if you register a patient in a hurry saying, hey, I'm Ram, मैं last week ही आया था. That guy searches for Ram. Oh, last week, ये तुम आए थे, हाँ. तुम इस village से हो, हाँ. Start registration, 5 rupees fees, go. But turns out it's the wrong Ram from the same village who came last week. This is India, right? Every left turn, there are 3 cars coming, right? So every patient is the same. Now the wrong Ram has reached all over. the doctor, yes, you have a history of diabetes, and then that guy like, no or yes or no. And we are looking at uneducated people. There's a high chance
No
they would not
literacy.
know what the doctor is saying. So the doctor is trusting the system many times more
Correct,
than the
correct.
patient for history.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
So you can't make a mistake,
Yeah,
right? In
yeah.
summary,
The
in
cost
a
is
situation.
quite high of
Yes.
making a mistake.
So how do you design a registration screen that is fast yet doesn't reduces errors, right? And ideally to zero.
Yeah.
Now that's a hard problem for a
Yeah.
designer, right?
Yeah.
To figure out. And then you have all these fields, plus you have like the Aadhaar number, or you have a national ID, Ration ID, where are you from, all of those various questions.
Right.
Getting the name right, getting the phone number, validating these things. So designing a screen like this requires designers who can think through the problem statement.
Yes.
Plus, you are building a product, which means every hospital that adopts this product will likely have a different registration screen. So the
There's no
product,
standardization.
there's no
Yeah.
standardization. So the product, even the way Bhamni has been designed, it's configurable. You choose what you want to capture and how the whole thing should proceed. So now a designer has to think of different scenarios, different hospitals, different types of care contexts, different languages. You'll have to capture in Marathi, you have to capture in Chhattisgarh, whatever, different languages, Hindi, all of them. You still want English. So that, and we needed our screens to support both, because the printouts we gave to the patients needed to have their name and other details in their local language.
Correct.
The doctors and others were using systems in English language. So the registration person is entering data in two languages.
Oh,
we
is
have to
it?
figure all these things out. So the keyboard has to be accordingly done.
Both ways.
And,
So
and
complex
it
problem,
increased
yeah.
complexity. Now imagine you don't have a designer.
That
You have an
is
engineer in this thing, right?
Yeah.
Now the engineer is like, hey, when will I get to code?
Yeah, I want to make this
Yeah,
application.
when will we make this application? Let me just make a screen and tell me if it's good or bad.
Yeah, yeah.
And the thing with design is that only when you see good design, you say, wow, this is great. But until then, it's hard to imagine good design for others, right? It's like criticizing a movie,
Yeah.
right? So until you see the movie, great. But if I tell you, go make the movie, like, I don't know what it will look like. I see the movie,
Correct.
this is bad.
Correct.
Right?
It's
Or this
easy
is
to
good.
say.
It's
Yeah,
easy, right? So this is why it's hard even to interview for good designers. If you don't know what good design, method is, process
Yeah.
is,
You
it
can't
becomes
tell
hard.
who's a good. And now there's so much volume in design,
Right,
like so many
right,
designers out there, but a few that are good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So like beauty in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. So it's hard to get good designers, and then once they come in the team, you suddenly see the impact. Then you're like, okay, now I see, like, this is a delta. But if you get an average designer, then the engineer is like, hey, I could have designed this.
Yeah.
Right. And that is why I feel now with AI, this is going to get even more harder, because AI tools are going to do your upfront basic design, right? Give them, I want to create a registration screen for a hospital software. This is the data I'm going to capture. It's going to be in
Yes.
2 languages. They will likely generate a Figma screen for you very soon with all of this. Then the question becomes, now do I need a designer, right? Yes, you do, a good designer.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
What do you think a good designer adds that the AI can't do? Maybe today like context or some customization or specific is something that the AI can't bring in, but eventually it might. But what do you think that like today even AI can start coding to a certain extent?
Yeah,
right?
and that's why this question is important for both people.
Yeah, both. Yeah, absolutely.
What is a good engineer? What is a good designer? We'll stick to the designer only today.
Yeah.
But I feel like a good designer firstly brings in experience based on what they have seen work and not work. That experience, right? So what is good? Because the problem with what is good is it's hard to describe.
That is
Hard to describe मुझे क्या चाहिए, right? Like a lot of times we've said like, yeah, go just do something,
Yeah.
show it to us, and then I'll tell you,
Yeah.
right? But it's very hard to describe.
Yes.
Okay, what a great registration screen will look like.
Yes.
Like for instance, even in registration scenario, there are scenarios of duplicate registration. So you registered a patient, then they came back after a year,
Yeah.
and you registered them again. Why? Because the person doesn't know I had come earlier,
Yeah.
right? And what is happening is you are saying, okay, I searched for you, I can't find you with this name Ram, or I can't find you with this name. I'm in a hurry. It's easier
me
for
do
me
another
to
registration.
do a registration, right?
Correct.
So they get re-registered.
Yeah.
Now you kind of have twice similar data registered. Ideally, the software should be able to tell you while I'm registering this
He
patient.
already is
हाँ
there.
कि here are 3 candidates that look like they already seem to match this. Are you sure you
Correct.
want to register this as a new patient? Yes, I want. I think I click on that. Looks different. Click on say, oh yeah, this is the same person.
Yeah.
Switch now my context to that. Right.
Correct. Correct.
That's the experience. But if it says no, the experience is go to patient search. From
Find the
search,
patient.
find the patient, see, and then click on that one. Then the person like, yeah, I'll just register.
Yeah.
It's faster to
It's
register.
easier.
How does it matter to me
Correct.
if I'm registering them twice?
Yeah,
Do you
that
see?
person's job is to get registrations
Yes,
and not
yes.
make sure that
Yes, yes. Who's going to go and say, अरे तुमने इसको 3 बार register किया? First, that person also needs to know, ना?
Yeah, yeah.
So the incentive is not there if it's poorly designed.
Yes, yes.
But you could say, listen, you can always just directly register everyone. Don't need to search. The system is so good that it can actually immediately tell you,
yeah.
right? So you kind of merged 2 workflows into one workflow in this design, where you're saying, I will type the name of the person. Anyways, I'm going to type for search also.
Yeah, correct.
So I will type the name of the person and it will say here are 4 options. But you can still keep filling register until it finds, oh,
The
you
right
have
match.
entered 4 things. Now I've
Yeah.
already got match. So that's a design option.
Correct.
Will it work all the time? We don't know. But we'll have to try
But this
out.
approach
Yes.
that you're saying, that how do you understand the real world scenario,
Yes.
not just the system scenario but the real world scenario,
Yes.
and solve for that
Yes.
scenario is
Yes.
something that you, I think, did a lot
Yes.
with Bamni, right?
Yes.
That was a very real world use case. And
yeah, and that's the reason this is happening is because there is context, right? We are not talking about an urban hospital where the person knows कि I have come to Jahangir Hospital or Ruby Hospital earlier. I know I'm an educated person. There are only 4 hospitals I will go to. I remember all these things. We are talking about cases where people are coming. They are either unconscious, very sick. Like in JSS's case, patients travel 4 to 5 hours by the time they reach the hospital. Okay, they will only travel so far if they have a serious illness, right? If that is the case, then there is a possibility that they are hallucinating at that point in time. They're not in their senses. There's no time to figure
do
out
all
whether
of
you
that.
come here before, not here.
Just
So you
need
just
to
like a Jane Doe
emergency
registration.
Yeah.
Let's just register her, and then we will decide later what has to happen.
Right.
Otherwise, the software is going to block.
Yeah.
So a good designer has experience of what is good, what is not good, in what context.
Yes.
That part is quite important, right? So the context matters. Based on their experience, they also have ability to detect what will work, not work. So for instance, how do I ask the right questions to users so that their biases don't come in while giving me feedback about the system?
Yeah.
Right? So the ability to empathize with the end user, see when they are struggling, when they are not struggling, what is good, what is not good, right? And then also being creative with the end-to-end flow, right? So as an example of creativity would be, again, right, in Mahamni's case, the doctor is the bottleneck in this world, right? Which is, the doctor is the precious commodity. So many patients coming, we only have 4 doctors who can look at these patients. But the support staff, we have a lot of support staff. You can get more people in registration counters because they don't need special medical training, right? You can just like bring people in. You can't just bring doctors in, right? So doctor is the critical. Now if you introduce a software, it is going to slow down if doctor has to keep entering data.
Yes, correct.
So what we did in our first deployment is that doctors only used the software for read-only purposes. Okay. So they would enter still stuff, their whole observations on paper, all of that, because they found paper easier, faster, right? Like also you're sitting with a paper, not with a computer.
It's the best piece of tech.
So they would write on paper, and then someone else later would take a photograph. So they had like a stand with a tablet on top. You just put the paper under it, press the button, and the photo of the paper would get attached to that particular record, right? The thing that the doctor used to just tap on was what is the diagnosis and tap on the medicines that they wanted to give, right? And there also they didn't have to. They can just type, right? The next person in the counter who's outside, they would enter the medicines, because that's, you are reading from there and doing it just like a pharmacist would do it, right? So what we are trying to do in this scenario is, you're trying to ensure the end-to-end chain the places where there aren't bottlenecks, they are the ones doing data entry, and the doctor is doing the reading. So doctor can open and see, last time when the patient came, this is what was done. They will see the photographs of their handwritten notes on it and say, okay, this is what happened. summarization of lab test results which are coming from the lab.
Yeah.
They are showing here as a trend. So that is
Right.
digitalized because the lab person has entered the results.
Right. Right.
So in this scenario, you are looking at creatively end to end what can be done. Now,
Yeah.
yes, engineers can also think like this, but the point we are trying to make it, designers are being trained to do these kinds
Yes,
of things.
correct.
Engineers are not being trained to do this, but good engineers
Can
may come
still,
up with it,
yeah.
right? Like
Correct. Correct.
nothing. Are you focusing on those kinds of problems,
Yeah.
or are you focusing on only the tech problems, which is the
Correct.
system architecture, scalability,
Yes.
performance?
Yes.
So that's the difference, and this is why having a designer who empathizes, goes and sees, meets the people, understands the context, thinks of end-to-end design.
Yeah.
That is what separates.
That impact
like,
is quite a bit, no?
yeah. And there's no. That's the other thing is, I don't think designers can easily freelance in this world. Then they have to get involved. You can
Yeah.
freelance, but
You're
then the
highly
context needs to
immersed in the
remain the
project.
same. You have to be immersed. Because
Absolutely.
it's like quality.
Absolutely.
Quality work, can't just happen in 5 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. Since we're on the topic of Bhamni, I want to understand because it's a DPG, right?
Yes.
And maybe we can talk a little bit about what a DPG is as well. But how is the approach to that very different from a normal software development cycle, let's say?
Right. So I'll tell you. So what is DPG? Quick short.
Yeah.
DPG is digital public goods. In a way, this is like a new term. I think it has come into existence maybe 2-3 years.
Since Aadhaar and all of that started off.
Yeah. So DPG is international now. The
Yes,
term is
it is
international.
globally, yeah.
And in a way, it says digital infrastructure, right? So digital public infrastructure which is digital in nature,
Yeah.
open for public to use,
Yeah.
and is typically supposed to be open source.
Yes.
Right. So Digital Public Goods Alliance (DPGA), for instance, maintains a registry of worldwide DPGA products which are approved for improving sustainable development goals, the SDGs.
Yes.
And they are in different categories. You could have data, you could have software, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Tutorials, education materials. So Bhamni is also registered as a DPG in the DPGA registry. And the idea is that when countries go to UN agencies for raising funds for digital software, they are required to first look at the DPGA catalog and use one of these softwares rather than going and
Building
getting
from
it from
scratch.
somewhere else.
Okay.
And there is a entry criteria for DPG. Like there is a quality bar, there is a functionality bar, there is a security and privacy bar. So you have to answer a lot of these questions, showcase evidence. Then only you get selected as a DPG. And all these answers are available on the website. So what did we write for every question? Where is the link to this documentation and so on. So I feel like DPG is a good movement because a lot of money gets wasted in writing the same software again and again
That's
and again.
true. That's true.
And softwares, like the first cut of a software is easy to do. It's when the real world and the rubber meets the road when it becomes hard. So products which have been around for 6 years, 7 years. So to be a DPG, you have to showcase success also.
Yes.
So you have to show where all the software has been deployed, what scenarios it has been used for, is it proven? Okay, you met that bar. Okay, you're ready now to be a DPG and be available.
Yeah.
So that's the journey.
Right.
Now, how is it different? So first thing I'd like to say is that open products are products. The same hard work that you have to do in an enterprise product, you will have to do here also. There is no difference there because you're building software for a set of users, for a set of jobs which you have to meet. So all the rules, techniques are applicable. The difference really is in the nature, right? The nature. So one is it's open source, which means anyone can access, anyone can contribute. So there is a community angle that can be strongly leveraged. So like in Bhamni's case, every Wednesday we would have a community call. For last 6 years, every Wednesday evening, 1 hour open community call where people come, they can ask questions, we give updates in terms of what is happening in the product, what is our roadmap, where do we need help. When we have features that we want to get developed, we ask for help. So you can join in all the chat channels, code, documentation repositories, everything is public. Anyone can join, anyone can come and start contributing. And we call for it. Now that has an advantage that then we get experts, right? So we've got doctors in our community who are contributing to the product. Right? Yeah. There's a doctor from Coimbatore. He has been evaluating Bhamni for last 3 years. Okay. He has written Notion books to say this is what the UI should look like.
Okay.
Within 5 minutes, the patient should get registered. A doctor
Right,
should be able to see them and enter this. This is what are the use cases I think we
Yeah.
want to see.
Yeah.
That kind of input for
It's
free.
very valuable.
It's for free.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the user
Is involved, right?
is
in the whole
involved.
thing. Yeah.
And what if we build the feature that he has asked us to do in the way after validating
Yeah,
that
of
it makes
course.
sense, you have direct buy-in. So as I said, one is the community aspect of a DPG,
Yeah.
right? That part is important, and it actually helps us a lot, and it needs to be leveraged even by the design person, right? So when a
Yes.
design person is part of this group, the design person may say, hey, that this is what I'm thinking, this is my approach, what do you think about it? The second part that is very important for DPGs is that they are looking at usually at adoption at scale.
Yeah.
Because they are targeted towards developing countries, places which are low resource environments.
Right.
Which means you will always have scenarios there which are going to be different from enterprise scenarios.
Yeah.
The number of people using a software will be very high.
Huge, right?
They will be likely using mobile devices which are not iPhones, right? As an example, they will have low RAM. Their mobile networks will likely be slower. Electricity likely will go up or down, right? For instance,
Yeah.
their servers most often will be not on AWS and on the cloud, but likely on data centers or locally hosted. For instance, most of Bhamni deployments, the software is running on computers and servers in the hospital itself. Right? There have been cases where suddenly there is a thunder strike and the server is down, or what if there is a flood,
Right.
or a lot of rain and your server gets submerged. Now these are very difficult problems for software developers also.
Absolutely.
Building systems where there's no backup, it's not always online, so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
even the designer has to think about this. So for instance, in most cases you will find in fact two applications very popular. One is called ODK and the other is called Avni. Avni built in India, ODK, I think US, Africa.
Okay.
Both of these are offline first mobile apps which allow you to collect data while being completely offline. They need no internet connectivity, but you have a Google like forms, you can fill forms. So as a social worker who's going, let's say, collecting COVID data home to home, or maternal health data going home to home, they will get these forms on phones completely offline, and they also have logic in them. If the patient has X, to that. They also have history of the patient stored offline with them, and you collect all the data, and then whenever they get network connectivity, 1 hour, 7 days, 14 days, doesn't matter, they will take the data, sync it, push it to the server, and then make it available for reporting. Any other data that came to the server, it will get pulled into these.
Interesting.
And these apps are like really useful for these areas, right? And now in general also local first development has become like a trend. So people are saying, hey, we've got these powerful devices, we are worried about data privacy, and why should this data go to the server? Why can't my data remain in my app, and I only reach out to the server for the code, for general processing, for the summarization, and so on and so forth. So these things were, so now imagine, right, once the designer comes into this is where service design and these concepts kick in. We need offline first. That affects the engineering decisions now, right? How they have to think. If your app is offline first, what functionalities? Can I send a notification? Not really, right? It's not there, as an example. Can I? And then now the bar gets raised, right? For design and for engineering. That if I'm going to create an offline first app, what parts can I pull in? And what parts I don't need to optionally pull in, right? I might say, okay, get me the patient's history for last 6 months if they have no chronic illnesses, but if they have like a diabetes history, then I need their sugar details for the last 2 years. So just pull those data points, because this is offline first device, right? Because I want to give this experience. So engineers have to now do some things to be able to say, okay, how do I send this information, how do I know what has to be brought in, and so on. So there's a significant tech complexity. But then the design is saying this is why we are trying to do this, and but aware of the limitation of the fact that we are offline and our mobile device has a limit on how much data it can process and how fast and slow it can work. So I think this is one other aspect in DPG that makes things complicated. The nature of low resource environments, for which designers have to design things much more differently than they would do for an enterprise, Google Chrome, AWS, Azure backed environment.
Yeah.
different class of problems.
Correct. Interestingly, also, I think the fundamental approach to a DPG is very different, right? Like, you're not looking at a standalone app anymore.
Yes.
You're not designing screens or interfaces anymore. You're
Yes.
designing a complete infrastructure.
Yes.
The approach
Yes.
to both tech and design
Yes.
is very different.
Yes.
Right?
So I would say
Fundamentally.
platform thinking,
Yeah.
which now to some degree even enterprises have started, adopting across.
Yes.
So having a platform thinking mindset for DPGs is really important because you are trying to build infrastructure on top of which other
Yes,
apps
are
will
going to
build
be
and
built.
a marketplace kind of a environment may come in. So
Correct.
then you have to think of design systems.
Yeah.
So by the way, India has a design system, UX for government, UX 4G.
4G.
And that is the one that is, kind of being
Across,
now
yeah.
sent to say, hey, if you're building something. And to me, a UX 4G or a design system is like a platform, right? It is a set of Lego blocks, a set of standards, set of guidelines that you're supposed to use when you're
Yes.
building apps based
Yes.
on this. So that thinking is also important. Once we are in the DPG space, what are the individual blocks? Which means product thinking needs to come in. Designers need to be aware of product thinking, which there usually are good ones. Again,
Yes.
when we keep
Yes.
coming to the good ones, right? We are saying, hey, it's not about visual design, not about pixel
Not
perfect
about
designs.
execution
Yes,
only.
those
Yeah.
things are important, but many other things are much more
Yes.
important, right? You and especially if you've not done the big thing, right? Hey, am I going towards Goa or am I going to some other place? Your high level design, which side are we going? We at least need to have those skills first. Then the
Yes.
pixel perfect stuff, visual design, all of
Can be
that
done.
that can
Yeah.
become
Like
later.
at a strategy level, right?
Yeah,
Like
at the strategy
bigger
level,
picture. Yeah.
bigger picture. Yes.
Just like I think in a tech situation, there is a tech strategist or an architect, let's say,
Yes. Yes.
and then there's an execution, like person who codes.
Yes.
It's two different layers of thinking, right?
Yes. And again, I feel like I keep coming back now to AI, right? I feel like with AI, certain things become easier, right? Like what questions should I ask so that I know I'm on the right strategic track?
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be able to tell you. Or what signals should I be seeing that will help me decide whether I should go for left or right? Like a decision like, should I build an offline first app or not?
Yeah.
What are the criterias? What are the factors I should check for, right?
Yeah.
AI can answer that question today, but you have to know to ask this question, right?
Yes,
It's not going
yes.
to tell you what questions to ask me. Remind me of the Dilbert
Yet.
comic. I want you to build this product. Okay, you tell me what product. You should know the requirements. You are the software engineer. Know what I mean? So it'll take
Yeah.
some time for us to
Yeah.
reach there.
Not too far though, I
Not
think.
too far.
Yeah, maybe
This
one
is what
day.
you need.
Yeah, one day we'll be able to strategize. Oh, this is how you should approach a strategy. I don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting.
In Bhamni, for instance, right? One more thing on a lighter note. A lot of times we used to tell our potential customers, use Excel. You don't need Bhamni, right? Like,
Yeah.
Excel is a good answer for many things. Only if that is not working, come let's talk
Yeah.
about. So I
Yes.
feel like some of these things are also important. It's important to acknowledge that there are easier ways, simpler ways to do things, and not everyone is ready for the complexity,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Not everyone needs
Needs
all
it.
of this
Yeah.
thing. If you need it, here are the factors. Let's look at it. And for others, choose the simple path.
Yeah. On that note, talking about minimum needs and like these MVP approaches have been around for a while.
Yeah.
Now they're slightly going off trend, I think.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
what do you think is the right way to approach an MVP? Or is it even a need? Like, do you have to still create an MVP today? Or what do you think?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think has happened with MVP, I feel like MVP now, at least for me, usually has a very strong reaction. When I
Yeah.
hear the term MVP, what I'm actually imagining is a poorly done increment of the product. Okay. Which someone believes is good enough, right? So they say, hey, let's do an MVP because they like, it's like agile. Let's do agile because I can make any decisions at any point in time. Let's do MVP because this seems to be the smallest increment that will directly give me value. But in real world, what I've started seeing, so that wasn't the intention of MVP,
Right.
but that's where it has devolved
Become
to,
now,
right?
yeah.
So I feel what happens with an MVP is that people build an MVP as their phase one release one version. So they say for this feature, I'm releasing an MVP, and then they move on. They forget that that was an MVP.
That was an MVP, yeah.
Right? So what it does, you have now 25 features released,
Oh,
all of them at their MVP stage, and people moved on to the next shiny, exciting thing. neither of them moved any needles, and now you're stuck with all
So
this
much effort that's gone
yes,
into
and
it.
you're not getting any value out of it, right? That's why I think the term minimum lovable product came into
Yeah.
the market, right?
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's a strong reaction to this.
Yes.
Saying that, hey, listen, the first thing that I want to really make available, or at least the point at which I pivot and move to another feature or to another direction, I should ideally have reached a minimum lovable product, right? Which is a product where the users, the adopters, they love and they're able to say, this is amazing, this is well done, right? You may not need to do this for every possible feature, but you also don't want to do something that is so hacked that, hey, this is MVP, let's just go out with MVP. So firstly, I would say if you're using the word MVP, you should use it only if you're using it as a learning tool. Learning tool meaning I'm creating an MVP so that I can go and speak to users and get an idea, are we on the right track?
Yeah.
What more would you like to see? And they need to see something most often, right? So an MVP could just be prototypes. MVP could be a simple screen which does have certain functionality in it.
Yes.
Now you see it, now you know this is integrates, is this valuable? Yes, this looks valuable. How valuable is it? Will you pay money for this? And we're not sure, not so valuable unless you give me this too. Okay, then I need to do that too, right? So an MVP is good when it is being used in the service of learning, in the service of validation. But an MVP, in my opinion, is not a good idea if that's going to be your first phase
Product,
one release for that feature. Then it's now let's talk about MVP and designers, right? If we go back to the original thing that I said some time back, right? You employed a design team and they've given you all the screens. That's not MVP. They've kind of gone ahead and done everything for you.
Yeah.
But what you chose to release is MVP or a small part, because you know that if I spend all this money, what if it goes to waste? Or I want to first do a small bit. So now, how do you choose this small bit? You're not going to release the same screens with all the functionalities. You're going to release with some of the functionalities.
Correct.
Now your design is going to get a bit compromised when you do this MVP thing. Why? Because certain functionality is not there, it's visible. So what do? You have white spaces in those areas? Does the screen look weird? The designer didn't imagine in most cases that it will be this first, then this next, then this next. They looked at it together.
Complete picture.
Yeah, because they are looking at
Correct.
what the end user wants to achieve, what do they need. So they did this whole thing, gave it to you, and you've now chopped and hacked it and done something else with it. You kind of many times end up with worst of both worlds, because the designer's intent hasn't been met, and the MVP that you're doing, because you didn't involve now the designer for this part, you're getting the worst version there also.
Yeah.
The other way would have been that the designers, the engineers, and you work together on only the first increment and said, we're not designing the whole thing. We are only designing the first
Part of it,
increment, and that increment will be amazing. And then we'll do amazing plus plus and amazing plus plus and plus plus. So that's
That kind of
something to think
alignment
about.
is
Yeah,
critical, right?
correct.
Yeah.
And this is where the group needs to come together to say what are our goals, products goals, first set of goals, and then long term goals. Yeah, long term, this is what it will look like. But our first set of goal will be like this, because you don't know 6 months down the line,
What's going
LLM
to happen?
summarization will become better,
Absolutely.
right? So the experience might change drastically, right? In a hospital software case, what would that look like? It could be that when the doctor the patient comes to your room, the doctor opens the patient. The first thing the screen now shows is a summary of the patient's history, generated through an LLM, right? So it's saying, hey, listen, I read the records, and here's the summary. This patient is pre-diabetic. This patient has visited this hospital 4 times. They are on XYZ medication, and today they are visiting for this problem statement. That is what the doctor likely needs, right? This interface is different from what a designer may have designed if this summarization tech wasn't
Was not
available.
there. Absolutely.
Right? So why design all of this upfront? Instead, focus on what your immediate goals are and doing minimum design with the engineers, with the team. So that is where I see MVP. But I also have an interesting example where it is very hard to do an MVP. At least in our case, it was hard. Okay. So imagine a drug prescription screen where the doctor has to prescribe drugs. Now, what do you prescribe, right? You will say, hey, I want to give, say, paracetamol. I want to give it once in the morning, once in the evening. So, one morning, one evening. Some doctor might want to give ointments and want to give creams. Then you will have things like in India, you have 101, which means, morning. Some will say BD, which is like, breakfast and dinner. So, BD. We say SOS, for instance, for medicine that has to had only when you need it. So the painkiller, acidity
SOS.
medicine, SOS. It's called PRN in other countries.
Oh.
Yeah, it's the same. It's a Latin which kind of means
Okay.
as needed.
Okay.
Then you have in a IPD setting, you have IVs that you prescribe which have certain flow rates. So you will say कि put them on a paracetamol at this flowing at this rate, X ml per. Then you have for children medicines are given based on weight and based on age. So you would say I want to give paracetamol and I want the system to look at the person's weight or age and calculate the dosage accordingly. Right? So now when we are building this screen, the question becomes that what is MVP?
Yeah.
Right? What should I build for this drug screen where I can say that this is MVP? We are good with our first thing. Can I say no? You can't prescribe ointments. You cannot give injections. We are only going to do tablets for the first release, right? What will the doctor do? Yeah, doctor will say 4 tablets in the software and 3 on paper.
That's not gonna work.
Not going to work, right?
Yeah.
So what ends up happening when you're building a complex functionality like this, you kind of get in trouble when it comes to the MVP definition, right? What is the minimum? There is no small step. Hey, doctors, try this out, and we will build other features incrementally. They will say, listen, you need to give me at least these. So what do you do in such cases? One thing that we did was you look at the use cases. So you say OPD for daycare and IPD for admitted patients.
Yeah.
OPD, you're not going to likely prescribe, IVs and so on. So we will only focus on OPD first and do IPD later.
Okay.
Now let's look at OPD. In OPD, like I said, you want the calculation for the age. So you will say, okay, you know what, a child specialist, doctors looking at children, that's out. But if you're looking at adults, you are in as an OPD. So now a general medicine practitioner potentially can use it, but only for adults. So if a child shows up in front of you where you have to do this, then you have to like manually do everything, or you have to write it separately on paper. Another requirement that most doctors have is that they have pre-created combinations. They will say, okay, for COVID, I was going to give these 3 things. For diabetes, this is what I don't want to type this every time. I know I'm going to give this set of medicines.
Frequently prescribed things.
So one would be frequently prescribed. Another one could be a set that is created. A third could be favorites. Then are you going to give branded medicines or are you going to give generics? The list is different. The name with branded becomes much, much larger. Then in branded, favorite branded. Then in a DPG type setting, you would have which X medicines are cheap, which are expensive, which means can patient afford this drug or not?
Right.
Are they in stock or are they out of stock? If they're not in stock, then why should I prescribe it? I can't actually, give it to them. I can't dispense it to them, right? If they're expensive medicines and going to reduce in stock, and these are requirements we've built for, right? I'm giving you real examples, right? The doctor said, hey, listen, these medicines are expensive. I want to be careful when I dispense them if they are going low, because I will be able to procure them only next month.
Yeah.
So maybe I will try the other dose then. But tell me, if I have enough, then I want to do it.
Correct.
So now I need, the
Some
stock
inventory,
management, inventory information to also flow onto the drug screen. So then the question becomes again, right? Like, what is MVP here, right? Where do we draw the line?
Correct.
And is that line good enough? And when will we address the next part to truly derive full value? So I do think that like aiming for MVP is very risky. It's important for learning and for feedback. Is the UI good? Are you able to prescribe fast? What would happen if I have to switch to an ointment, cream, other tablets? What if I have to show you history, right? So those scenarios come in, and then there is clinical decision support systems that give you a warning that you have prescribed someone an antibiotic that they are allergic to. Those that now you have a whole set of messages coming in while I'm prescribing. And then you have to read all of those messages as a doctor and then decide, yes, maybe I shouldn't do this, maybe I need to increase this, maybe I need to decrease this. So it's quite a challenging thing. Done well, great. Not done well, it's worse. Then it's like, I don't want to use this system. It has too many alerts, too many things.
Scratch.
Yeah. So we struggled because we did our first version of the drug and we got quite a lot of feedback. And we were never able to incorporate it because the feedback required us a redesign. A redesign required a designer and like 8-month runway, right? And then a retraining for all the users who are used to the old design, moving over to the new design, creating like a feature toggle that allows you to choose new doctors potentially go to the new screen, existing doctors stick to the old
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah.
And then while prescribing drugs, the feedback we got is I want to see the history on the left hand side of the same screen. Now we had the drug screen like taking the whole screen.
Ah.
So now you need a split screen view
Yeah.
to be able to show the history, the lab test results, and then the doctor's prescribing by looking at it. A split screen view means the design elements have
Has to
changed.
change. Yeah.
Can't be the same thing just compressed in two lines, right? Now you have to rethink of the way you have to do stuff. So these are, I feel, real, like they are difficult things to counteract, and you need the right funding, the right people, the ability to, and designers and engineers working together.
On that note, a lot of times organizations hesitate to invest in design, right?
Yes,
Because
yes.
it's expensive.
Yes.
What do you think is the cost later? Like, do you
Yeah.
think it makes sense or what? Because it's a big question mark. Like, why would people? Also, the impact is not visible upfront, right? They
Yes.
see it only after you get them in. Let's
Many
say.
don't see it also, huh?
They don't
Many
see it
don't see
also.
it also. It's
Absolutely.
like, something great could have happened, but you
Yeah.
never saw it, right?
Absolutely.
So I think the phrase that's coming in my head is like, if you don't want to invest in a gym, wait till you see the surgery bills.
Oh my god, that
So
is a very
yeah,
good metaphor.
yeah. So it's like, and if you don't invest in design, wait till it reaches the market,
Till it breaks.
or wait till the first competitor, invests in design.
Yeah.
It's almost like that. Like I feel like I look at examples like Zomato, and I feel really good design, really good
Approach,
thinking
yeah.
of small things,
The
scenarios,
experience, yeah.
experience, and so on, integrating it with MyGate and many other examples. So I feel if you don't get a designer in, I'm not saying that others can't do it. It is who is primarily spending their time thinking about the experience.
Yeah.
You need a person worrying about experience. You need a person looking at what is possible, looking at where the industry is going, what kind of experiences are now possible, and then providing them and saying, hey, we can do these kinds of things, and these are low value, low effort, high value
Yeah.
items.
Right.
And that's where I feel investing in design is important. I mean, I have, like I said, I have seen not working with designers and then working with designers.
Yeah. You've
the
seen
the difference is
yeah.
good, but they need to be good. And
Yes.
that's true for engineers also.
Absolutely.
They need to be good engineers, otherwise don't bring them on board, right?
Yeah.
So they need to be good designers, otherwise don't bring them on board. I think that's what I would
Yeah.
say.
Cool. So we're gonna move on to our fun game segment now.
Yeah.
So yeah, you better be excited, Gurpreet. So this is called retire, experiment, and commit. So it's like kill, marry, date.
Right.
Retire is kill. Well, you don't want it to do anything with it anymore. Experiment is date. You open it, trying it out, and commit is marry. Like
Okay.
you will go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
And
retire, experiment, and commit.
Commit. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm gonna this is rapid fire. I'm gonna say out a liner or a word in product development, product management, or something, and you choose one of these three. And you can also give me a one-liner why you choose that.
Okay.
Okay. And it'll be quick. Yeah.
Okay.
Ready?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Let's go. So the first one is iterative product development. So small updates frequently. Would you retire?
Commit, definitely.
Commit. Why?
Because learning will only happen iteratively.
Okay, cool. Next one is customer feedback loops.
Commit. Customers know much more than you do
Okay.
about their problems.
Cross-functional teams. Having designers, developers, product managers collaborating from the start.
Commit,
Yeah?
definitely.
Awesome. Data-driven decision making.
Experiment and mostly commit.
Okay, why?
So there's a quick story here. Huh? Can I speak
we
it
can.
fast? So
Yeah,
the story is that we did some research on one software, realized that only 0.5% of our users use Windows browsers, and as in the Edge browsers and so on, Internet Explorer browsers, and the others use Chrome, Firefox. We released everything Chrome, Firefox, and then realized that our company's call center people were the users of Windows, and they couldn't support anyone else in other softwares because they had all plugins and macros installed. So that data, which we thought, hey, is so small, its context was it was mandatory. So the feature had to be pulled back, re-support Windows, and then go. So yeah, I mean, I think the challenge with data is it tells you the story you want to hear. So that is the problem. But data definitely, backs many things. So I would say I wouldn't say commit to it, but I wouldn't also say experiment with it. It is definitely going to be helpful, but commit carefully.
Yeah.
And commit
Okay.
cautiously.
Okay. Awesome. A/B testing.
Experiment mostly. I wouldn't say commit. Again, A/B experiment can only lead you. You already made a decision, and then you're, within that you are doing A/B experiment. But if you're like experimenting between two wrong choices, it's not going to tell you that. So I would say you experiment with it and then use it carefully in places where it matters, but don't commit to it.
Okay. The last one is integrating AI in your processes.
Definitely experiment with it because I have personally been using AI for many things in product management in terms of domain and so on, and it's been really, really helpful. So, but you have to use it, carefully, know its limits, know when to use it. So experiment definitely, don't commit right now.
Yeah, not yet.
Yeah, not
Awesome.
yet. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So that's the end of the game. And just to end things, Gurpreet, do you wanna like just tell us where we can find you, or you know?
Yeah, so usually LinkedIn is best. I used to be on Twitter, but after Elon Musk took over, I kind of moved out and never came back. So yeah, LinkedIn is usually the space. You can just Google for Gurpreet Luthra, ThoughtWorks, since that's where I spent last 10 years. So I show up, and then LinkedIn would be the space to connect.
Yeah.
If you're in Pune, I'm working out of Kaizen's office in Phoenix Mall, Viman Nagar. It's a really nice place, and you're most welcome to
Yes.
come anytime and say hello.
I also know that you have your own podcast. So where
Yes.
can we find that?
Yes. So Expertise, the podcast is called Expertise. The idea was to basically I come across a lot of folks who are really good, and I felt like I wanted others to know about them. And so I created Expertise. I basically interview friends and colleagues that I come across. So just search for Expertise. It's everywhere
like
available.
expertise, right?
Expertise. Yeah. TEASETs.
Yeah.
So Expertise.
Awesome.
So yeah, again, Gurpreet Luthra podcast or Gurpreet Luthra Expertise, and it should be there on Apple, Android, or any Spotify forums. It's
Perfect.
there.
It's been awesome to have you.
Thank you. I enjoyed.
And very nice conversation.
Thank you. I really enjoyed
Yes.
this discussion, and yeah, UX and design. I would say let
UX.
it. Don't leave it behind. It's super important if you're going to design good
if
products.
you leave it behind, you're going to be left behind.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you, Gurpreet.
Thank you.
It's
thank
been
you.
a pleasure.
Yes, same here. Thanks a lot, Shravani.
So thank you guys for listening, and please give us some love. Many more episodes coming in, and keep listening to the MyUXScore podcast.